Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thomas Hampson here. It's Tuesday. This must be Song and Beyond on IDAGIO Live, a cooperation with my foundation, the Hampson Foundation. Everything about song, poets, librettists, that's not really the right word, poets, performers, scholars, and of course, like tonight, incredible composers. It seems a long time ago, but it was only last week that we came live from Hamburg at the Elbphilharmonie, where we were just about to start filming our Liederabende, our recitals of songs for 2 nights before we had our big orchestral concert, which turned out to be the first live concert at the Elbphilharmonie in 7 months. So there was a lot of excitement on the 31st, but all of the shows are now online, and they were premiered on the 2nd, the 4th, and the 6th. And if you go to elbphilharmonie.de, you can watch these for the next 12 months, which I'm actually extremely happy about. There was a wonderful cycle, Song of America, a celebration of Black music. Now, you may ask yourself, what's this white guy doing with Black music? And that's a fair enough question. And quite frankly, in fact, I love the question, because to me, the story of America and the story of American culture is an American story. And yes, I treasure the very ethnic streams and influences and sources of our story of American culture. And it is American culture, but especially the canon of classical music seen through the eyes and ears of our Black African-American poets and composers. To put a fine point on it, Langston Hughes is my poet as an American. Yes, he's African-American, and it's wonderful to celebrate his heritage, his color, his unbelievable passion for things American, and more importantly, things human. And that's where it all boils down to: one constant river of humanity with many, many myriad wells that are drilling down to find that essence that remains timeless and that we can all celebrate together. And I don't think there's many better art forms to do that in than song. So please, no more of that. That's what this is all about. This is our last program on the celebration of Black music, and I'm so incredibly pleased to have these wonderful composers joining me. I do not know these people personally, but I know their music now because of the project. They were all brought to this project from the singers that sang their songs, which is quite fun. And I'm really looking forward to, as we now say so easily, unpacking and drilling down whatever those silly things that we say about where these songs came from and where this music come from. So first, and by the way, I'm just old enough, there's some things I will not do politically correct. So ladies first. Rosephanye, did I say it right?
No, that's close. Rosephanye.
Oh, God, Rosephanye, I apologize. Rosephanye, it's a wonderful name. Rosephanye Powell. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
And Brandon Spencer, where are you calling in from? Where are you? What did you say, Rosephanye? Where are you?
I am in Auburn, Alabama.
Auburn, Alabama. Fantastic. And Brandon, where are you?
I'm in Detroit, Michigan.
I was just on a long session with University of Michigan this afternoon. And Peter Ashbourne, where are you calling in from? And welcome this evening.
Thanks. I'm in Kingston.
You are in Kingston.
Yes.
That's why it said Kingston on the window when it came in.
Yes. I don't have a picture for the Zoom.
You know, I just want to take 30 seconds to all of us to sort of take a breath, and the audience as well. All of our, and by the way, lady and gentlemen, we have every Tuesday now, around 5,000-6,000 people that are song crazies, which I like to tease them with, that check in on this program and follow this. IDAGIO is one vehicle, but we are also live on the Hampson Foundation Facebook page. So you have a lot of people that are getting to know you perhaps live for the first time. But if there is some part of this horrible pandemic that we can say, okay, well, at least we moved the dial forward on that. It is this self-understood digital world that we can work in. This might not have been possible or thought so, or would have been more exotic, 18 months ago, or now it's just what we do. I think it's going to have an enormous impact on on classical music, period. To have people know that it's real people writing words and music, that it's real performers who have troubles with their dogs and their kids, as well as brilliant moments. There's no question, and I want to get this off the top for those of us, especially our public. There is no question about whether digital is going to replace live. It's a nonsense question. It's the wrong answer to a question that shouldn't be asked. We are in a new now where digital is far more ubiquitous, far more accepted, and can augment everything you want to know about and experience in music, so that when you have your live performance, and thank goodness we're starting to have more live performances, it will be a richer, personal, more personal experience for yourselves. That's the end of my preaching this evening. And without any ado, I've asked all three of you, because there's I'm not going to say how much information one can find about you guys on the net is very discrepant. So if you would just, each of you, give us a Wikipedia. Where did you grow up? What did you really want to do before you became a composer? Were you a gymnast? Did you play golf? Did you play soccer? Do you have siblings that are also incredibly musical? If you wouldn't mind sharing some of that personal development and where you went to school, that'd be wonderful. And I'm going to say it right, Rosephanye, could we start with you?
Well, I am from Alabama, and I began generally as an athlete. I have three brothers, so sports was my thing on the front end. You name it, I was doing it. But that was my dad. My dad was big on sports. I'm an only daughter, three brothers, but my mom is the one who put me into piano lessons. So there was this battle between sports and music. And then, like many kids, I grew up playing for my church and sang in the choir and played in the band. And from there, majored in music, but just found myself, even as a young person, every time I had free time, even as an athlete, I was sitting around either singing or rearranging music that my choir or band played. So I think that was the first inclination that composition might be a part of my life. And then from there,
what instrument did you play, if I can interrupt?
I played the best instrument in the world. I played sax, which I know others will consider brass and other certain other. What about yourself?
Well, I played very badly the piano. I played at the drums. I had one afternoon on the timpani, and that was a disaster. I knew that was not my future. But then I actually landed, I was a rather large young man, and the tuba was missing in the band. So I became a tuba player for 3.5 years. And then I had to decide between chorus and band, and the girls in the chorus were so much more cuter. So I just went to the chorus. And that's enough about me. Back to you. Sax. I wanted to play the sax, but at our school, there was only one mouthpiece, and I just didn't go there.
See, well, we're just the opposite, because I actually wanted to play the drums. And but old school, my mom was like, girls don't play drums. I never forgave her for that, but she's still my mom and I love her. But drums was what I wanted to do. But I played sax, sang in the choir, and then I went to school to study music.
Piano?
Actually, I studied voice.
Okay.
And was music ed. And then after undergraduate, I did a lot of arranging for choirs that I performed with, and I went to school at a historically Black institution. We call them here HBCUs. So
exactly.
That's where I got a lot of my experiences with the African-American spiritual, African-American composers. And then from there, I went to Westminster Choir College in Princeton. And I was studying vocal performance and pedagogy, still wanting to do recitals and things of that nature. But I'm a lyric soprano, and it was made clear to me we're a dime a dozen. You better find something else to do. And I loved choirs. Sang with Flummerfelt and at the major halls in New York and Philly. And from there, I went to work on my doctoral degree at Florida State University again, working with choirs, and was arranging things and kind of got discovered there, composing a particular or having one of the choirs sing one of my arrangements there. So that's really how I got started.
Well, I knew you were a singer, obviously, and I mean, yeah, it's wonderful. But I was just wondering if along the line, Mom sat you down at the piano as well. Did you have to get some sort of rudimentary piano thing going?
Oh, yes. I studied piano through my middle school, through high school years, and some at the college level. Uh, but I'm like you. I'm generally a bad pianist, just because I didn't keep the skills up. But my mom, I think she knew I had this bent for music, so she fought my dad with the athletic thing. But I'm grateful that the music won out.
I love it. I'm not even good enough to be called a bad pianist. I mean, I figure it out enough to sort of, okay, that's lovely, and I get okay. Now I have to go find somebody, because I've never been able to, play and do all that. Never mind. Never. We're not going to go there. Peter, I'm going to leave you to the last, and we're going to go to the young man on the right and say, Brandon Spencer, you're on Wikipedia time.
Hi, I'm Brandon Spencer, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. I have just kind of been involved in music my entire life. As a kid, I sang way more than I talked, and it's probably still the same today. I didn't grow up listening to classical music. I grew up mostly listening to R&B and hip hop, and like my mother is a huge fan of old school R&B, so like that's really where my heart is. And you even hear that sometimes in my music.
True.
Like the sort of R&B idioms and things like that, because that's just really what I grew up on. And I went to the Detroit School of Arts for high school, which was when I actually was really introduced to classical music. And then there's there's this whole other world of music that I didn't even know existed. And then people that look like me who are actually doing it. And I'm like, wow. So I started writing, actually started writing in the 10th grade. Just happened to stumble upon Finale for the first time. And I'm like, oh, I can actually write music with this. This is so cool. And I wrote this
fantastic, really
horrible arrangement of of Give Me Jesus for choir. It's just terrible. but in that moment, like as a 14-year-old kid, it was like I just couldn't even believe the possibilities of what I could do with music. Like it was like a whole new world had opened up to me, and it's just been pretty much since then. It's like, again, like I sing and I write more than I probably even talk.
Do you sing? When you say you sing, are you singing your own music? Is it music you write and then perform it yourself?
It's a little bit of all of that. I studied voice at Claflin University, which is also a historically Black college in Orangeburg, South Carolina. And I'm baritone. I sing with the Michigan Opera Theater chorus, which is really fun.
And very good.
And awesome, yes.
That's very cool. Mr. Ashbourne, I want to revise the program a little bit here so people are, Peter, sorry, so that people are not confused. We as well, my co-curator in this project is Louise Toppin, which I'm sure you all know, the wonderful professor of voice at University of Michigan, but also one of the most well-known scholars of African-American culture and especially music. And she has, in fact, created this marvelous project called African-American Diaspora Music. African Diaspora Music Project.org. And the issue or the cause of Black voices in general was also part of this project. And I didn't want to assume that you or put you in the American continent because you are Jamaican. And we as well had the turn of the century Samuel Taylor Coleridge on the program. We had another, I forget the name, a Black Cuban composer on the program as well. So anyway, I'm not entirely correct when I said it was a celebration of African American. It was a celebration of Black music. That's the point. So, Peter, please.
Okay, all right, thanks. By the way, on the matter of composers,
yes,
Jamaica, do you know about Samuel Felstead?
No.
He may not have been a black Jamaican, but he was a composer born in Jamaica, born and died in Jamaica, and he wrote the first oratorio in the Western Hemisphere. It was
if you could write his name in the chat for me.
1743, around the time of Mozart.
Wow.
Right, that one. Jamaica is a special place in some ways, you know.
And still is.
Yes, yes. We hope. All right. Anyway, if you wanted to hear what happened to me, no, I'm simply an adopted child. I was an adopted child. My mother went to England during World War II, and she studied there, and then she came back and she decided to adopt some children, and I was one of them. Yeah, I was found in a little home somewhere up in the rural Jamaica, and my aunt, her sister, was a music teacher, and she's the one who said that I had a good ear. So he'll do the violin. You know, that generation, that's the way they do it. You know, he's musical, he will do such and such. And there wasn't any, that was the end of that. You know, I did the violin. And the next year I started the piano. You know, that's 9. When I was 9, I started the piano. I took one of those exams. They have English examiners that come down and examine. And one of those fellas declared me to be a little genius. To be a genius, and my life, it wasn't the same after that. I had the usual teenage thing. I discovered pop music probably a little late. And those are the days when I liked Burt Bacharach and Motown. Right.
And hopefully you still do.
Oh, yeah. Actually, Bacharach has been an inspiration in many ways for me, believe it or not. But anyway, we'll come to maybe. Yeah. I wrote apparently I didn't stumble onto composing. I just started composing when I was 11. And I wrote something when I was 14. I had to do an arrangement of Jamaican folk songs for a festival. And that actually is the first really organized thing I did. And it turned out, I turned it into a string quartet piece in 1985, 30 years later. Anyway, wrote my first arranging chart for a pop band at when I was 19. And then, when I left high school, I was very fortunate to get a job in a recording studio, and that's where I learned how the recording business worked and the whole process. Absolutely. And it also gave me my, I think, my values about, I tend to have a studio attitude, get it perfect, not get it right, which is a double-edged sword, by the way. Anyway, God, yes. my mother wanted me to be the good old doctor, lawyer, business, accountant, engineer, the kind of thing. And she finally gave in and got me. I did 1 year of university in Jamaica at the University of the West Indies, and then she sent me to BU in Boston.
All right.
I went there as a sophomore, and I didn't like the course. You university people will love this. I went in. I was sent to this violin teacher. To be fair, I didn't look so great at that point, right? I had a lot of hair, right? And I said, Prof. such and such, Miss thing there sent me to talk to you about getting violin lessons from you. He said, I don't know about that. Who were the principal composers of the Notre Dame era? And I went, what? Who were the principal composers of the Notre Dame era? And I don't know. When you want to play B flat on a trumpet, what do you write? C? Well, I don't know. I'll speak with her maybe. And that's what started me off, and then I was living in a dormitory, And my roommate, who was somebody on a basketball scholarship, said, "Don't go in the elevators on Saturday nights." And I said, "What am I doing here?" I'm the Black American experience. It's taken me decades to realize this, and the Caribbean experience are different experiences. They're unpleasant in many ways, but the Black American experience is quite different.
Yes.
And, it took a little getting used to. Anyway, what happened is that Berkeley is walking down to where is it, Kenmore, and going across the freeway and down on Boylston Street, and there it is. So I went there, and they were still taking students. I got a late entry, and I transferred to Berkeley, the Jazz College, and I took a little exam and got placed in an advanced placement class where we did the work at twice the rate, and it turned out to be perfect for me. And I was in a class with 15 other guys, and we all knew a little music, and we were taught by the best teachers in the school, and we're going at the pace that we wanted. And it turned out to be the best call I've really made for my education. And so I got the composition training, but I got also a lot of other training from a jazz point of view. It's the same music, I've discovered, but the POVs are different, right? In other words, well, I'm thinking technically, right? In other words, Ravel, Herbie Hancock didn't end up studying Ravel for nothing, It's and there of course is Bach, So this is how I ended up. Then I went back to Jamaica because I'd got a scholarship from the Jamaican government. I went back and taught for a bit. Oh, I should mention that before I left, I had started writing advertising jingles. And I discovered, remember I started composing when I was 11. I discovered I had a gift for melody. And as advertising was at that time, which would have been the 1970s, it turned out I could write jingles, and I was very successful at it. I used to go to college in Boston, and then every holiday I got, I went back to Jamaica and worked for some money to pay for the plane fare to go and come. And it served me well. So I've done 35 years of doing music for advertising, and because that's a more stable source of income, it's afforded me. I was able to write some write for dance, start a little string quartet, that sort of thing. You do your art music on the sort of periphery of surviving, of making a living.
What strikes me so immediate in all of you talking about your music is that and also your background. I mean, talent doesn't care color, doesn't care sex, it just doesn't care. It's that human thing. I mean, it's the human construct that has all this nonsense going on. But actually you get to do it. All you can do is say, thank you very much, and then accept the responsibility and work. Having said that, of course, we are hearing a lot today, and I think it's getting a little noisy, and I mean as in dissipated, about this idea of classical music being racist, or that there is an implied, there's too many white dead guys that are known, and too many not dead. Well, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And yet, I have less trouble talking about racism in the industry than I have taking my knife out at Beethoven. I'm reluctant to do that, but that's not the issue here. What I mean is, all of you have referenced this inner voice that you found, regardless of what path of institutionalized music was in your way, or you made it your own. And I find that quite fascinating. And I think some of the people that are very frustrated about their right to make their own music, however, you need to have the basics to use those tools and those musical elements, are confusing the issue. Do you understand what I'm trying to get at? I'd love for you, any of you feel inspired to jump on that wagon, please do. Do you understand what I can ask a direct question? Do you feel, was it clear to you very early, any one of you, that the music you heard and the music you wanted to write was not necessarily what you had to learn to have the right to write that music?
Not quite sure what to say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not a very good question. I apologize. I'll just keep banging on it until something becomes clearer. Musical elements are constant. How they're used in what context gives us the experience of the music. And that, you okay?
I was going to comment on what you were saying, and I don't know if the brothers relate to what I'm going to state. Yes, I was learning classical music. Two of my favorite composers. I love the counterpoint of Bach and Handel. I love the form and structure of Mozart. I love the long lyrical lines of Verdi, the beautiful lyricism of Ravel. When I compose, all of that Eurocentric music is part of the foundation of how I compose. And yet, like Brandon said, and Peter, I grew up listening to R&B. I listened to gospel. I listened to jazz. So those flavors are part of my vocabulary. I don't have to compose as my voice is a combination, which is the African, at least here, the African American experience is the African experience combined with the European experience. So the slaves that were coming here were coming from Africa, that the language, the dialect that they used, the music that composed and that came from the modality of Africa, the rhythm of Africa, it became our voice as it was combined with the influences of those who were the masters over them. So what I think, as I relate to what you're saying, I have a voice. I took in what I was taught, but it comes out uniquely, I think, through me as an African American woman. And even though people may not always be able to hear all of the influences of jazz and R&B in my art songs or my spiritual arrangements, I can explain to them where those flavors are, because it's all a part of who I am as a composer. So when someone says, well, I don't have a voice, if you have a gift or a talent for composition, everything that's been put in you comes out as a part of who you are, not distinctly. It can be, but it's not necessarily distinctly Black, but the Blackisms are in it regardless. Right. So because it's part of who I am or who we are.
I appreciate that. Gentlemen, anybody want to riff on that? Let me ask you, Spencer, you mentioned R&B and this deep thing. When you're composing something called classical, do you feel like you're in another universe than the R&B that's rattling around in your heart?
Oddly enough, no. I think it definitely, kind of to Rosephanie's point, I think is just because it's a part of who I am. I don't approach, when I'm writing music, I don't approach this as I'm going to have some influences of R&B in this. It's just, that just happens because that's just who I am. And I think Peter mentioned that he had a gift for melody. And I think, like, I feel the same way about myself. And I think that comes from listening to the Isley Brothers and the Whispers and the OJs, because it was all about melody back then. And It's like you can still, like, implement that without it sounding cheesy or corny, like you're trying to make. I'm trying to make classical music that sounds like R&B. Like, it doesn't have to be that, but like Rosephanye said, you can point it out. Like, oh, I can give you specific examples of songs that have this exact chord progression in it, and I just literally lifted that and put it in a classical like art song or even a choral piece.
That's exactly what I was trying to get to. Thank you very much. Exactly. This chord progressions, the old 1-4-5-1, you gotta, it's like you may be Hemingway, but you've got to learn how to write. And that's where I think some of this dialogue about, I don't really want to unpack the whole question of classicism and racism. That's not my point. My point is that there's something constant in musical elements that allow composers to have their voices. And just what we're talking about, yes, I realize this is a bit of a detail for our public perhaps, but chord progressions, harmonies, melody. I mean, melody in song is kind of a sine qua non. I mean, you're going to have even if you don't have a melody in a song, it seems to be intentional to avoid the issue of melody. It's sort of like Dada art. You only understand Dada art if you understand art. If you forgive the pun. Peter, you have something you want to add to this?
No, I was just picking up on something you said about the melody, because why I'm on this forum is because I've done compositions that have started with a traditional song and gone from there. And I think, well, aside from the fact that somebody asked me to do it, right, and I like working with the folk songs, but I think it's because I still all right, the compositional stuff that's going on now, like your standard European, your standard English composer. Yes. There is no quote melody. There is stuff going on, and you hear it, and all the techniques that are going on. But I find that I still have difficulty dealing with it. It's not reaching me emotionally a lot of the time. Sometimes yes, but other times no. And so because of that sort of aversion, I may have ended up with folk songs. Jamaica and the English-speaking Caribbean they share a number of folk songs. It's hundreds of them actually. It's probably about 300 of them, and some of them are beautiful as compositions because you cannot improve on them. Better heads than I have tried, Tchaikovsky and Mozart, they all tried, and nobody can improve a folk song, right? And I think it's because those folk songs are wedded, they're firmly in the tonal universe, and then I try to take that and do some stuff with that, right?
Dvorak would have loved you.
No,
that was his great mandate at the night. It was vociferously criticized by the Boston community, the Brahmins of the time, said, "Oh, what a bunch of rubbish," and all that, and yada yada yada. And even my dear beloved Mahler weighed in on the very wrong side of history. But that's for another show.
That American sound, the one that those Ferdigraf and Copeland and Bernstein and isn't it coming from Dvorak? Remember
yes, in a lot of ways, but I mean Dvorak was very specific at the end of the 19th century, and he said an admonishment to the composing community of America, and said you are listening to the wrong sources. You should be listening. Yeah. You should put your ear to your own ground and listen to the folk melodies of the Black community. Although folk melodies from the Indian or what we now call the indigenous community are not necessarily folk based. They're more ritual based, but nevertheless, you need to have your ear to the ground to your own soil, which was very necessary at the time, running the National Conservatory as he was. And of course, he was also deeply impressed by Henry Burleigh, who was his musical assistant. And you know, all of that, as we say, is history. What I think people love hearing contemporary composers talk about, and I've had all of you that were on the program. It was not my intent nor my avoidance in these 3 evenings to have so many contemporary living, breathing composers on the program. And to quote Marilyn Horne, you know, the song continues. And that was really exciting, especially the 2 evenings of sharing songs in the bouquets. The first evening centers on the poetry of Langston Hughes in both German and English, which is an interesting conversation. And then the second evening was more of a panorama, a bit of a historical perspective, starting with Burleigh and having some Price, and Margaret Bonds was in both shows. And of course, yours and my beloved composer, I think the most neglected genius of American culture still today, William Grant Still. I just, you know, I don't get it. You know, I mean, you know, drop the needle, ladies and gentlemen. Go to IDAGIO.com and listen to the Third Symphony and listen to the Fifth Symphony and listen to all of his chamber music. I mean, just go for William Grant Still. And after an hour of listening, if you don't come back saying, why don't I know this music? I'll buy you dinner, you know. Oh, that could be very expensive. Oh, dear Lord. I don't think so. I don't think anybody's not going to say that. Anyway, but I'm not here to bang on that. But what you also said, Peter, I think is an important point that I started to say that before I digressed myself. And that was that to hear contemporary composers, which cliche, most people, all this kind of nonsense.
20 minutes of bubble and speak.
Right. Yeah, but yeah, exactly. But to hear you all passionately talk about the power of melody, the power of emotion, the power of I mean, isn't that the purpose of it? Isn't it? I think song is about the Pascalian formula of head and heart at the same time.
Yes.
Is that what you guys get? As I know you write a lot of music, a lot of different genres, but let's just go down the song road here. What is it about writing songs, setting poetry to music that you love? Rosephanye?
Well, you know, for me, it's you know, my background is in the heritage of the African American spirituals. They were sung in my small community, and as Peter's talking about, that folk music, which is the core, the foundation of all African American music, is why I think. And you talk about the Jamaican folk music. We're starting with lyrical, beautiful melodies, and because of what at least our people went through here in the United States, the music itself was the means of communication, which means it had to emote, and it emoted because it was our experience. And so, as a composer, I am totally in line with these brothers in that. For me, music, it begins, first of all, with the words. The words for me are the impulse. They're the muse. That's what gets the music going. And my job as a composer is to figure out who the poet is and then what they were trying to say in that poetry, and then become a conduit to enhance that poetry beyond what can be just spoken with the words. So that is about emotion. That is about heart. And when I'm composing, I want the artistry there, but I believe if the emotion and if it's well composed and has a heart intent, there will be artistry. I think the problem comes when we try to make artistry primary, which takes the heart out of it, which is why then it doesn't necessarily move people, but just becomes an act of academia or intellect. I think all of that goes into songs that are well composed. Then the audience receives the gift, which is what we're supposed to be giving them, rather than leaving the same way they come. They leave a different place because they've been touched. That's how I compose.
I could hug you right now. That's just, I mean, that's just, there we go. Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much for saying that. All of you students watching this show, play that back and listen again, and play it back. And when you finally can write it down from memory, you're good to go. All right. Anybody else? Do anybody want to disagree with her? I don't think so. Anybody else want to riff on farther? Tell me, Peter. Tell me something.
No, I heard Rosephanye say something. I tend to be a little more technical than that, though. I, do the musical, apply music to words, and I think it's while I'm trying to get the technical thing together that I say, oh, that's what they're saying. I tend to be a little bit, I don't know, obtuse, I guess.
I don't find that contradictory. I find that a very interesting part of the process.
But what has happened, though, is that I've done something, and that these folk songs that were performed, and afterwards, a year later, having heard them, I say, hey, this guy was writing something useful, in that sense, I guess I'm still an intuitive, so.
Please, Rosephanye.
I'd like to, make sure Peter understands we're in agreement. There is the technical, but for me, the poetry dictates what I'm going to do technically. I will find people who will say, I've got a melody, and now I'm going to squeeze this poetry into the melody instead of allowing the poetry to dictate harmonically what I'm going to do, form-wise what I'm going to do, rhythmically. I speak the poetry over and over and try to get the rhythm of the poetry to become rhythmically what's going to happen in the song. And then all of this technical, which is what I'm right there with you, Peter. I want it right. I want to say what I think needs to be said intellectually, musically, and heart-wise, by allowing what I understand and have learned technically to play out in what I want to be emoted. So I'm right there with you. We may have a different approach, but it's the same.
I just want everybody to write your name down, and you have a wonderful website, and you have some wonderful self-performances of your music, which are quite wonderful. But I mean, actually, what you're also talking about is as a vocal pedagogue as well as a singer, and I've now sung in 14 languages in my life, and as you well know, spent a lot of time in song, especially in German and French, and especially in English. But the point is, working with my young colleagues, exactly what you just said, also technically. Once you've inhabited that poem, once you've inhabited what the composer wants, exactly the process you just did, then as a singer, you got to figure out how to stand up straight. You got to figure out how to keep your ribs out. You got to figure out how to, where's that resonance going to happen that keeps your throat from going out your ears? I mean, all that stuff. I keep saying this, and I don't mean it disrespectfully, because she was a very close, not close friend, but she was a very close colleague and friend, Jessie Norman, and I have her book, and I like the fact that I don't need to read it. I stood next to her. I know the woman, but the book says stand up straight and sing. And I think, right. I mean, just buy the cover, take a picture of it, anyway, but technique doesn't abrogate spirit. Technique enables spirit, in my opinion. Brandon, I'm still loving the idea that your heart is in R&B and you're writing all this. By the way, please go to Brandon Spencer's SoundCloud, which has really got some unbelievably beautiful music. In full disclosure, all of you, I knew your names because I know the breadth of repertoire, but I was not familiar with your music. And as the colleagues came up, and I want to talk about specifically what was sung on the programs, and I would say, oh, how fun, I'm going to hear that person's music who I had not heard your songs. So, and I don't feel, maybe 2 months ago, I would have felt really embarrassed by that. But ever since Anthony Green said that he and his best friend Ashley got together one night and said, we should dedicate ourselves to Black music. And they went, well, I know Well, do you know? Yeah, but then and they kind of came up with 12 names, Meanwhile, Louise Toppin has got 4,000 titles and composers on her diaspora website in song, and another 1,600 for orchestral work that she is now awarded to the American Symphony Orchestra League. So, may there be an epiphanal moment in all of this. And I'm going through all of this a little bit jocularly because I also want our public to relax. I don't know how many times I heard preparing this cycle, especially in Germany, I've never heard that. I didn't know that. Oh my God, I don't know. Man, should I? What should I say? Just let the music speak for itself. And that's what they did. And everybody's just in a state of euphoria. I mean, of all things, and you guys know this better than anybody, William Dawson, the Negro Folk Symphony, played for the first time on the European continent, and just jaw-dropping, or Valerie Coleman, Umoja, jaw-dropping. And then the evening of songs, the technicians were coming to us, the people backstage were coming, because we were all digital, and they were saying, thank you. We've never heard this music. This is incredible. And all of you got spotlight. Your ears must have been burning. But let's quickly, I don't want to keep you much longer. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to your music, but Rosephanye, I'll start with you. We had from you, I Want to Die While You Love Me, as well as A Winter's Twilight. And this was sung by the young Canadian mezzo, whom I very passionately believe in as a singer of songs, Emma Nikolovska. And she just loved these songs and said, I really want to sing these. Did you have a chance to hear? If you haven't, please do. But tell me about those songs.
Yes, I did hear her sing them, and she sang them fabulously. They were stunning. She brought out so much of what I wanted to happen vocally as well as emotionally. These songs, Miss Wheatley's Garden is the name of the cycle, and I name it for Phyllis Wheatley, who was the first published African American poet. And what's remarkable is that she was a slave when her poetry was published, and she traveled throughout the world, especially Europe, with her poems. And so I for this cycle, I chose 3 African American women poets as to set their works. And I called it Miss Wheatley's Garden because my thought was, like with the spiritual, without Phyllis Wheatley, there would be no Angelina Grimke or Georgia Douglas Johnson. So all of these poets are part of her garden. And so then I chose specific poems that spoke to me, and they're quite different, but they're not specifically, I have people from around the world contact me and say, hey, I'm not an African American. Do I have permission to sing these songs? And I always have to tell them that these particular songs are not necessarily, you wouldn't even know, I don't think, if you didn't know they were Black poets and that I was Black, you would not know that these were songs by Black poets and a Black composer, because they're composed strongly in a Eurocentric fashion, again, with my harmonic flavors, including jazz, including rhythm and blues. But I think when people hear them, if they didn't know I was Black, they would just think that these were art songs, which is what they were composed to be. They were supposed to take the voice of African American women out into the world, for people to hear our voices in poetry as well as me as a composer in song.
Rosephanye, I dream of the recital I can give, and I swear I'm going to do it before I quit. Of just singing the songs. I'm not going to put the composers on the page. I'm not going to put the poets on the page. And when the recital's over, everybody's going ooh and ah about this, and when I'm having a nice way, then I'll go back and say, oh yeah, gee, could you, or even ask, but that'd be too silly. But was that a woman? Was that a man? Was he gay? Was he straight? Was he Black? Was he green? Was he tall? Was he short? Was he old? Was he new? For God's sake, can we just celebrate the human spirit? Can we just, and in this sense, the seen through the eyes of the Black experience, my other passion about this, and we're going to go on, this project was So much of the Black creativity, over especially in the 20th century and into the 21st century, has been through the digestive eyes of the allowed white community. And this has got to stop. This, God bless a day when we talk about American culture and we don't have to say African American culture or Asian American culture. On the other hand, I mean, you get my point of that. We're always going to say that, but it is about this community. But never mind. Brandon, tell me about writing songs. Think of you. I'm thinking of you. This is a trio, and you're the second movement.
The song that was performed was Dream Variations.
I beg your pardon. Dream Variations, Langston Hughes. I beg your pardon. And sung by Larry Brownlee. Not a bad singer.
It was amazing.
Yeah, truly.
I just couldn't even believe when I read the email and it was like, Lawrence Brownlee will sing Dream Variations. What? Like in real life? But
yeah.
Dream Variations has always been one of my favorite poems. Langston Hughes is definitely my favorite poet. I love how the sense of Black pride that he brought to so many of his poems. I know during his life, there was a lot of a sense of Black people wanting to appear better to white people. And Langston Hughes wrote a lot about Black people just being proud of who they were as they were. And one of my other favorite poems probably my favorite is My People. And I have a setting of that one as well. The night is beautiful, so the faces of my people. And I just love how much Langston Hughes loved Black people and how he spoke about them. And then I even draw comparisons to some of the poets of today, which are, some of them are poets, some of them are rappers. And I've even started writing art songs set to poems by Tupac Shakur. And I feel
I love it.
Talks about Black people in very similar ways to the way that Langston Hughes did, because we try a lot of times to uplift Black people for doing things that aren't Black. But I think Langston Hughes was, and so was Tupac, all about Black people being proud of being Black and not needing to assimilate and not needing to appear a certain way in order to be proud of who you are. You can just be who you are and absolutely love who you are. And I've always loved that about Langston Hughes. And I try to approach every poem of his that I set with that kind of mindset of just, I want some Black person to hear this and just feel super proud of who they are. And I love what Rosephanye said about leaving the concert hall feeling like a different person and feeling different than when you came in. And that's really why I write music. I write music because before I knew who I was able to write music. And I feel like people discover themselves through music. And I most definitely, when I write songs, that's kind of the sort of gentleness that I want to go into it with.
Can I ask you a loaded question? What about a white person singing your song, Dream Variations? How would you feel about that?
I think.
Is it all? I'm not trying to corner you. It's an important conversation that we, as musicians, as artists, composers, and artists of both colors, go up, because I agree what you hinted at, Rosephanye, is that there's some stuff that white people should not sing, but I don't think we need to dwell on it. I don't think that's the point. The point is what is it can we celebrate of each other and of this American culture in this context. Peter, don't feel left out of this conversation of the Black and the white. But I've actually sung Margaret Brown's Dream Variations. But how was a composer? Because that's what I want to ask Peter as well. We were talking about that earlier. How do you feel about a non-Black person inhabiting that song or that sentiment? Much less your music.
Me?
No, Brandon. Sorry.
Brandon.
I think I just think as long as it's done with sensitivity to what the the pure intention of it was. I think we can all take things that were written for one reason and apply them to different things. Like, you know, Dream Variations could be someone who has been made to feel ashamed of their sexual orientation or their religion or whatever. But I think as long as you have that sensitivity to knowing that this was written for Black people, I think, because there's some things like you said, there's just some things that are just for Black people. There are some things that were literally created for Black people. And it's not to say that other people aren't allowed to be in those spaces, but I just think the sensitivity has to be there, and it can't be turned into, well, I think he might have been writing this for me too. I think
I get that.
Sensitivity has to be there.
Yeah, you sound very much like George Shirley talking about white people singing Porgy. But that's another conversation. Please, Peter, we had your Liza and Nobody's Business from Jamaican Songs, and Leah Hawkins sang these songs. Had you ever heard Leah sing before?
No, I haven't. I've watched a couple of the Met streaming things, but I don't think I ever.
Well, she's got that kind of voice that takes your breath away. And she did the whole week. Everybody was just going.
No, her technique is awesome. Boy, that lady can sing.
That lady can sing. Were you happy to hear your songs?
It's very nice because, and it's very nice that it's someone who is not really connected to Jamaica, because the songs have done a bit of travel. You know, there's a young lady in England who is English, but her parents are Jamaican, and she's a singer, and she's been going up and down England using the entire song cycle, which is 5 songs. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of young ladies and gentlemen, for that matter, in the USA who, you see it always, part of their masters recital past, you know, and all of them have some connection with Jamaica. Right. Now, this is the first person who has come sort of, not any direct connection, and has decided to.
And she did. She brought them. She apparently does the whole cycle. She loves them.
Yes, splendid job. Wonderful. And as we had a fragment of a conversation with this, she went across, to the Jamaican sort of patois / language, and it takes a bit of getting used to. But as you said, that's what you singers do. You have to learn other ways of
absolutely.
So I think she did a splendid job. It is. I'm really happy. I'd love it if she could do all 5 songs.
I believe she does. I believe she does. We simply wanted as rich a bouquet as we could, and the only cycle that we did complete with the Songs of Separation of William Grant Still, and everything else were important moments, because we wanted to get as many composers on the program, and Louise felt.
By the way, Thomas, could I please let me get my little bit in? Congratulations for a wonderful program.
That means a great deal to me.
Yes, we really appreciated it. Now, I'll tell you the honest truth, there are not a whole lot of singers that are going to get me to sit down for 2 hours and listen to them. Right? I can deal with half an hour. Right?
That's why I brought all my friends. That's why there were 6 singers. I thought, well, if you don't like her, you can like him. If you don't like him, you can go with her. Whatever. If you don't like the black guy, you can take the white guy. You got the white girl, you go with it. No, I'm just being silly.
It was nice to get the spectrum of compositional styles, and it was really.
Did you have thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate that truly deeply. It's a passion of mine, as you know, and all of you know. But by the way, all of you, hopefully will spend some time again on the website and read the notes. We have our wonderful scholar in residence, who is Kira Thurman, a African-American scholar born in Vienna, or at least raised a great deal in Vienna, bilingual completely. And she wrote us some wonderful contextual notes for each program, as well as those things that have not been translated into German. She and her team translated into German some poetry that had obviously never been in German. So, it's a wonderful project. The Elbphilharmonie was my great partner, run by my very good friend Christoph Lieben, and I can't say thank you enough. And the Hampson Foundation. What is really fantastic is all of this music and all of your moments. You wonderful composers are living there in evidence on that website for now 12 months. So be happy and send people there. Send them to Louise Toppin, African Diaspora Music Project.org or the Hampsong but more importantly, just keep writing, please. You all are just so wonderful. And it's just, thank you for this conversation. I promised to be out by an hour, and we're done exactly at 1 hour. Would anybody like to say anything else you'd like to say? Would you, is there anything else I left out?
No, it's great meeting you all.
It's absolutely wonderful to meet you all. Thank you so much. We say goodnight. It's another Tuesday. I'll see you next Tuesday. It's great to be with you. And again, thank you.